Welcome to the Pro Design Builder, the show where professionals and entrepreneurs share their stories, strategies, and secrets to building a thriving business and a successful life. I'm Sam, your host, as we dive deep into the world of life experience and entrepreneurship. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Pro Design Builder. Is a coaching and consulting platform where we coach real estate investors how to build spec homes and new and multifamily projects. Pro Design Builder is not just about building a business, it's about building a vision and a life by design. Also, you know that foster care is something that's near and dear to my heart. I've had a number of kids through my home. I've adopted 2 kids. I'm currently fostering 1. The mission is never over in foster care. If you ever feel led to give, there'll be a link to the Patreon. Feel free to give to our foster care initiative. Some of the things that we addressed in our foster care initiative is things that we are blessed with having a fam team, which is meals. Sometimes if you're the primary cook, you know how important that is to give you just a little bit of break and a little bit of a breather. Also, date night. We want to make sure that we keep the family unit strong, which is one of the most important pieces in foster care. And then the other thing is we often provide beds for foster and adopted kids. So if you ever feel led to give, click on the link to the Patreon. All right, without further ado, I wanted to introduce our guest today, Justin Batterton. He's a father, he's a husband, he's a minister, he's a life coach, he's a leadership coach. There's so many great things that he comes to the table and he's equipped with. And more importantly, he comes to the table with a lot of great life experience. So just wanted to introduce you, Justin.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So just as we get started, there's a certain theme that we like to go down, which is we like to start at the beginning before we get to, the business end of things. So I just wanted to ask you, what were you like as a kid? And were there early signs of the path that where you would head?
Oh, as a kid, I mean, always, like you say, I like to start off from the very beginning because I think, especially the older I get, I realize the impact it had on my life. So when I was born, talking about the beginning, right?
Yep.
2 days after I was born, my grandfather died, right? And my mother, let me kind of set this up as saying my mother was 17 when she had me. So this is 17 in the 80s. So we all know how that was. It wasn't like unfortunately, like nowadays, people having, children early. It was 80s. So she's 17 in the 80s, early 80s. And she had me. Then 2 days later, her dad died. And then 3 months later, her sister died. So, within a matter of months, she's lost her dad, lost her sister, and then now has a child. And same thing goes with my grandmother, lost her husband and her, her daughter, and then had me. So started off kind of rough. And I said that to say, like, as I grew up, my biological dad wasn't in my life most of my life. And my mom remarried. I got adopted by my, at the time, stepdad, which is now a kind of adopted dad, when I was about 5. And they got divorced, I'm going to say when I was around 10. And I think that's really when all things began to shift, really shift. I mean, there were some things beforehand, especially my biological dad not being in my life. It kind of really affected me later down the road of that abandonment issues. But then when my parents got divorced, we moved in with my grandmother. And then it just kind of really got rough. About when I was about 12, my mother started dating a guy, and the best way I could describe it, and I describe to people in my story, is she left me for another guy. When your mom, she lived in the same town, not far. And it's not a huge town. I mean, it's, I guess a regular sized town, but I wouldn't even call it a city. But she lived in the same town as me, but I never saw her. It would go weeks without even seeing her, talking to her, or anything like that. So I'm living with my grandmother at that time. And when I did see her or did go over there, at this time, I'd already started smoking cigarettes. Again, I'm 12 years old. I'm smoking weed, doing all the drugs. I'm early, young.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I would go over there and she let me do all, smoke cigarettes, take a drink here and there. And again, you don't realize what it's doing to you then, especially being so young. You're just trying to, again, for me, I guess, was just, I'm now getting attention from my mother. Um, so about a year later, she, he, the guy ended up in jail. She moved in with her dad or his dad, and at the time, man, we ended up moving. I ended up living with them, with her and his dad, and even then, my mother wasn't around a lot because she worked, and so here I am, 13 years old, taking care of my little brother. A lot of times, I would have to get him up, get him dressed, ready for school, and around that time, I was about seventh or eighth grade, so I was 13, 14, whatever, but. So I had to get him up, get him ready for school, do all those things, and then come home, and I'm the one getting getting him a sandwich after lunch, getting his homework started, things like that. So, being young, but also having to be an adult, kind of again played a lot into my life, and now into things that I do on the good side of things. But kind of fast forward a little bit, about a few months later, I guess about a year later, after living with her and him, my mother ended up in jail. I remember getting picked up from school by said boyfriend's dad and getting told, "Hey, your mama's in jail." And so here I am, 14 years old, not knowing where I'm fixing to live, where I'm fixing to do, and having those worries, which no kid should have to worry about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of sent me down a little further track. My grandmother, bless her heart, she did everything she could to try to save my life. She even got me arrested and turned me in for some weed she found in my wallet. Got me on probation, trying to save my life, and unfortunately, it didn't work. But that's where I kind of got involved in church. My aunt and uncle was my youth pastor, and so, but I still kind of ran from God at that point, and kind of fast forward a little bit more, and just it went down further hill. I mean, by 15, I was doing cocaine, acid. 18, ended up on methamphetamine, started selling drugs. And when I was about 21, started dating a girl, ended up getting off of meth. But when we broke up, I ended up on pills, started selling pills. And it was when I was 23. I was 22, 23, got my first felony charge for Xanax. And then got on probation a year later. I will say, even at 22, you're not living a right lifestyle when a narcotics agent walks into the police station where you're at, and can tell you, even though your car's not there, can tell you your license plate number and everything about you. So
Mm-hmm.
you already know you're not living the right life, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up did not wake me up at that point. About a year later, got another felony charge for Xanax, and at that time, I was an ex girlfriend. Found out she was pregnant, and it was mine. This was in December that I got arrested. So around January or so is when I found out, but he was going to be born in April. And so April 5th of 2007, my son was born, and I knew something had to change. And so that month, I'm really trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. I didn't want to I knew I was looking at prison time. I was looking at 5 years in prison. Did not want that for my son because I knew what it was like to have a parent in jail. I knew the
Mm-hmm.
effect it had on somebody's life. So ended up, man, ended up looking into, my grandmother told me about a program, Adult and Teen Challenge. And at that time, I'm like, man, I'm a man. I'm going to do my time. And then the judge tells me 5 years in prison. I'm like, you know
Oh,
what?
jeez.
You know what?
That's a wake up. That's a wake up,
We can
right?
try
Yeah.
something else, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Exactly.
that was in April. Throughout that time, well, when I went for official sentencing and all of that, was I was supposed to go on a teen challenge on the May 4th of 2007. And like I said, I was like, I got to change my life for my son. So May 4th, 2007, I was set to go in. Well, then I called and I said, hey, I'm not knowing if they're going to the judges let me do this, or I'm going to have to go to prison. Let me at least go to court. And, because I didn't want to pay money and then not be able to go. So was set to go. He's like, all right, we'll come Tuesday right after court. I was like, bet, I'll do it. And well, on that Sunday, May 6th, I was out partying with friends. I was out of reception. This is early 2000s, so it ain't like we had smartphones and all that stuff. It was old flip phone, had no service where I was at, and I get a voicemail, and I find out my son's in the hospital and it's not looking good. Uh, and so I go home, and I kind of give you a vision of how bad off I was. Most parents would just rush to the hospital, but instead I rushed to go get drugs to get high one more time before I went to the hospital because I had to kind of quote a little bit, cope a little bit. And so I get to the hospital, and eventually the doctor comes in and tells us we got to make a choice. And thankfully, her dad stepped in and was like, "Hey, you can't make this choice. They're too young." So the doctor made the choice and ended up, my son ended up passing that evening or late that night, about 11 o'clock on May 6th. So my world was rocked. The whole reason I was getting my life together was no longer there. And so that following Monday, uh, friends did what all friends do, drug friends do, and they just got me really high and really numb. And I mean, that whole day is a blur. I think I have one mental picture of me, and that's sitting out my side of my grandmother's house getting very, very uh, high loaded. And so Tuesday morning, I'm in court, not knowing if I'm going to prison for 5 years. Now, I will say that Monday, somewhere in between there, I realized I still had to make this choice. I still had to either go get my life right or go to prison. And I knew in the state of mind that I was in, if I would have went to prison, I would not have made it. I would have, if I did make it, I probably would have got a lot more time because mentally I would have hurt somebody.
Mhm.
I was just not in the right mental state at all. I mean, I just lost my child, so it was given. So went to court that morning. I know if I'm going to prison for 5 years with Teen Challenge, they allowed me to go. Left there, went to my son's wake. The next morning, went to my son's funeral. Then the next morning, I was in the program, and just that's where I kind of was really fell in love with God. Really gave my life to Christ, and haven't looked back since that.
So you threw a lot of things out there. So I'll just go through a couple of them. Right. You talked about some of your abandonment issues.
Mm-hmm.
With your dad not being there, and then obviously it kind of happened again with your mom not
Yeah.
being there. How would you say the abandonment issues showed up in your life?
Oh man, I mean, a lot of ways. I mean, even after giving my life to Christ, that's the thing. It's like we can give our life to Christ, and I got clean and all that, but there was still some of those deep rooted issues I really had to really get help on. Um, they showed up in many ways. I mean, even relationships. We'll even say like we'll go relationships until my wife. I had never been with a girl, as far as a girlfriend longer than 1 year. And that was one time, and that was the girl that I was with when I quit the methamphetamines when I was 21. Outside
Mm-hmm.
that was like 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like that way of like I'm not, I'm not gonna get in that because they're gonna leave me anyway. So it's either hurt or be hurt, right? And so it really showed up in that. And then whenever I started dating my wife, I began to see a lot of the other issues. Always scared she's going to break up with me, going to leave me. Never was something that she would have done. But in my mind, because everybody outside of my grandmother has left me, so obviously, it's going to be the same thing. So I kind of was self destructive in a lot of areas when it come to that. And as I look back, it's like that away for a lot of things, man. And it also taught me. My wife would tell you I didn't. I'm just now learning how to feel. Because that's the thing is like I really didn't know how to feel because of all the stuff I went through. I had no choice but to bottle it up. Until later on in life, and so I didn't know how to feel. I had like certain emotions. I had happy, sad, or angry. That was it. There was no in between, and a lot of times sadness came out in anger. So it was hard to really kind of learn to feel and have emotions and what emotions look like and have healthy emotions. So that's another big way it came out. And that's one of the biggest things, over the years I've had to work on was the abandonment
Mm-hmm.
issues.
No, I asked that for a specific reason, and because I had noticed, in myself, through time, I've similar to you. My wife is saying you just learning how to feel. Really, I'm just learning how to really express myself too. I just never had expressed myself, because when you go through, a ton of trauma and a ton of mess, well, what happens naturally is you just clamp down, right?
Yep.
And for a lot of reasons, I was very misunderstood, and no one would be like, man, why does Sam operate like that? Why does he move like that? Why is he so not nice with people and stuff like that? That's because when you see people, in the way that I saw them with, during this epidemic, if you had those experiences, you wouldn't blame me. So it was just one of those things, and I felt the same, abandonment issue, and I just wanted to kind of highlight it on, because what it can do is help others in seeing how these past things could play into today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. So you get into this program. Were you ready to make this change, or you felt like this is something that you had to do?
I think it was both. I mean, at first it was like something I had to do,
Mm-hmm.
but going back to when my son was born, I knew something had changed. I had been trying to get clean for years. Just this thing, like I knew the life I live in was not didn't have a future, right? I knew that I mean, I was selling drugs and hanging around the wrong crowd. I knew I didn't have a future, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted more. And when it comes to my walk with God, I always I was at so like I would always pray at night. I always felt that I had a somewhat of a relationship with God. Now I know now I didn't at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was just more of like a say I did type of thing. But so it was like part of me knew, but another part of me was like I was forced into that situation. So it was like God's like, all right, you ain't got no other choice. Here you go, type of thing. But it was what I needed. Now, being in there, you still have to make a choice, right? I mean, I worked for the
Correct.
program. I ended up working there for 13 years. I ended up being a director of one of the centers. Uh, so I was there for a while. So I saw guys that would come in and only came in because mommy and daddy asked them to, or jail made them, and they wouldn't make it, and it would be hard. So that's why I say I think I wanted it, just didn't know how bad I wanted it until I was forced into it.
Okay. Who would you say was the biggest influence in your life when you were growing up?
You say what or who?
Who? Yeah,
My
who?
grandmother. There's
Your
no doubt about
grandmother?
it. My grandmother. Yeah, I mean, my grandmother was my person. Okay, my grandmother was growing up. She was the only person I could know I could count on. Period. The end. Um, she was my. She was the one that kind of held me strong. Always prayed for me. Always believed in me. Always poured into me. So there's no doubt that was most of my life. Honestly, that was the only person. It wasn't like I had an option. It was she was the person for majority of my life. And honestly, until again, I love my family, but there's been a lot of stuff. So there's been a lot of hurt, and I've went through forgiveness, forgive them all, but still there's there. But until I met my wife, outside of my wife, that was the only other person. Was my grandmother. So when I met my wife, she became the second person in my life to always be there no matter what. So like I had again, that was my grandmother was my solid until unfortunately she passed June of 2019, and that kind of brought up a whole lot of other issues from a lot of other things, with grief and all that, and sent me on a whole nother downhill spiral, not on drugs and all that, but mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just honestly coming outside of that over the past couple of years. But yeah, my grandmother was, and still is the most influential person in my entire life. And actually, whenever she was at the hospital about to pass. That was actually what I did. As I wrote some of the lessons I learned from her, and read it on her funeral because that's the way I kind of process it. All right, what have I learned from my grandmother over this years, and wrote them down and read them over at her funeral.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. We often see a pattern. For me, obviously, I'm in the foster space, right? And quite often, The way that I describe it is I am like this, all four limbs. We're like this, trying to trying to hold family together, right? And quite often it's the grandmothers that are stepping up to the plate to try to be that person that's holding, family together. So in several instances, the grandmothers have been, pivotal in stepping up. And it's a conversation I have with my wife all the time. I go, thank God for these grandmothers. So so thank God for your grandmother for sure.
Yeah, no, there's
Definitely
she
seriously.
was. Yeah, she was my person, and like I said, I wouldn't be the man I am today if it wasn't for her. I wouldn't even be here. You wouldn't even. There's no doubt you wouldn't even been talking to me right now if it wasn't for her.
Mm-hmm. So was there a aha moment, that set you on your current path, or you were just, going through the motions and then you decided to to really commit to the program and change your life? Was there a moment like that for you?
Uh, I don't know if it was a necessarily aha moment. I just knew, looking back over that, because programs, you're it's 12 to 13 months in house, and then you do an internship. And while in the program, I just remember saying, "All right, God, like I was so broken. I mean, you got to think I lost my son, and even the first 2 weeks of the program, you can't even talk to your family, period. And so I had nothing but God. And I remember somewhere along in there, I was like, all right, God, if this is real, I'm going to give you everything I got, right? And if it's not, the worst thing that could happen, I'll just go back doing what I was doing. I'll end up in prison, but that was the life I was on anyways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just really fully committed in saying, this is what I'm going to do. And when I did, I mean, I was I was on my knees at the chapel. There's in what they call the second phase, which is the last 8 months of the program. There's a chapel, and that's the only place you can be after lights out. And I was in there every single night, really just seeking God, just really because I wanted something different. And I knew, looking back now, I can see that I was always different than everybody else I was around. Not to
Mm-hmm.
bash them or say nothing bad about them, but I always felt I had a purpose somewhere, helping people, doing things that were much greater than the life I was on. But I was so clouded by the trauma that I wasn't on that path. So in the program, I think it was just me saying, I don't know if it was necessarily an aha moment, or just like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And then somewhere it just kind of faded as I didn't want nothing else. Now, I will say an aha moment as far as staying the path and the ministry route of it is, I remember about 8 months in. Well, I wouldn't say 8 months, probably about 6 months in. I knew that I felt like I needed to stay on as an intern, because you have to do an internship afterwards, or you can go back out and work, and you just got to stay accountable. But I felt like I needed to do an internship. But then somewhere along the lines, I started fighting it. And man, you want to talk about a battle. Like, I would sit there and say, oh, I'm going to go home. But in my head, I could tell, like, I could literally feel like something was telling me, like, if you do, you're going to fall flat on your face, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I fought it and fought it. And then going back to the court system, man, and God using, God, I guess with me, he knew how hard-headed I was, but he knew how much I did not want jail. So,
Yes.
literally the judge told my lawyer that if I did not do the internship, I would have to go back up my time, the rest of my time.
Oh,
And I
geez.
was like, all right, well, there's my decision. And I
Mm-hmm.
stayed in and did the internship. Well, again, the internship's 6 months. Well, come 6 months, I'm like, you know what? It's what's one more year, right? And I ended
Mm-hmm.
up staying on and doing that. Uh,
And then what were you doing during that time? Were you facilitating anything? What was
well,
that?
internship. So I started off just what they have, a donation truck. So I just started off a donation truck driver, but I quickly became the manager of the donation service. At the first part of the internship, I was a little bit of everything. I mean, donation truck service, and when I became staff, I was mentor. I was over the kitchen. I was uh, the director, the guy that's over most of Louisiana Teen Challenge, his wife's assistant, so helping count the money, things like that. And then when we opened up a center here in Shreveport, Louisiana, I really felt called to be the teacher and dean of students. And so I came and helped start it. get it up and running, became the teacher, and then I was that for a few years. And then when the director decided it felt like it was his time to leave, they asked me to be the director, and I became the director for the last 5 years. I was the director until October 2020 when I left. So,
So this didn't just change you. This really kind of changed things for you because it created a level of stability for you that you didn't have, and definitely a consistency in work life. How are you using the skills that you learned there and translating that to life now?
the skills I learned there, I mean, one is very disciplined. So the structure and the discipline is very big to me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I wasn't ever structured discipline beforehand, but so I guess that would be the two biggest. And outside of my walk with God and just the devotion and read my Bible daily, things like that. But it also just taught me how to be a man, how to be a man of God. Growing up, again, I didn't really have a male figure in my life for the most of my life, so there's a lot of things that I was having to learn on my own. So having that side of it, of learning who I was, kind of walking that side of it, but then even what I'm doing today as far as coaching, the leadership side of it, and really falling in love with leadership, studying leadership, and having that passion has really kind of set the path to what I do now.
Okay. Do you feel like your challenges brings something extra to the table when you're talking about leadership in your coaching?
I do. I mean, one, the ability to persevere. My whole life has been an uphill battle, so I've learned to persevere and overcome obstacles. So I think that's a big one. It's helping people overcome that. But then also, when I left there, and kind of this will give you a little bit of what my coaching is about. But when I left there, I went into real estate. So I I became a realtor. So that was what I left for because I knew, and also I guess with that my love for people. When I
Mm-hmm.
left there, I knew it was my time to go, but I didn't want to go back to a construction job. I had to help people. That became a passion of mine, and it always really was. Even in my drug stage, it was. It
Mm-hmm.
was just my heart. So that's why I went into real estate. But one thing I noticed in real estate, it was the struggle I saw within myself, and I've seen within a lot of leaders. Is it's one thing to be, all right, I'm a Christian leader,
Mm-hmm.
but implementing those kingdom principles within your leadership and
Yeah.
what that looks like, it kind of transition. It's like we separate the church and the business, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we don't apply these principles even into our business. And so, like, that's the thing is, I saw the struggle, but that's also where I learned how to do those things. I discovered myself in a new way because when I stepped away, there was one thing I saw, and I really felt God tell me is it wasn't until I stepped away from there that I really discovered my identity, right? Because most of my life it started off with my identity was wrapped up in my pain, my trauma, my abandonment, right? And then it went to I was Justin the drug addict. Then I went to Justin the drug addict and drug dealer. That's where my identity was. I was known for these things. I mean, from 8th grade, I remember being known as the drug addict. So, and
Mm-hmm.
it's sad to say it like that, but I remember I was a person. Hey, where do I get this? And I'm a freshman in high school. So, um, then we go to when I left there, I went into Teen Challenges. So now I'm Justin the Teen Challenge student or Justin the Teen Challenge director. When I left, that's how I was introduced. Hey, this is Justin, the director of Teen Challenge. Everywhere I went, even my wife would be introduced as uh, Kitty, Justin's the director of Teen Challenge's wife. So it became
Mm-hmm.
my identity. So I had to spend time really rediscovering who I was and who God called me to be, and then it was where I learned what He's calling me to do. It was just, man, it was a lot. So
Mm-hmm. Yes. So who would you say Justin is today?
I mean, first, I mean, Justin's a man of God.
Right.
Um, yes, he's a husband and father. I really don't like even putting it like that. It's I'm a leader. I'm a world changer. That's my passion is to love on people and see people, and that's who God created me to be. Um, yes, I'm Justin the father and all that, but it goes back. I don't want to wrap my identity around those things. Those are things that God has blessed me with, but I could easily wrap my identity around that. Justin, leadership coach, but I'm just for me, it's just I'm a child of God that really loves people and loves to see people walk into who they're called to be.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Yeah, I'm just, now starting my journey out in coaching, but I've been, coaching or life coaching, so to speak, for the last five years with, my kids in foster care. So we do all of this trauma-based training to look out for certain things, whether it's attachment issues, whether it's all sorts of issues from the past and how they show up in the present. I'll share just one story of my daughter, right? And this just goes to show you how far certain traumas go. So my daughter was removed at 6 months, right? And she was removed from care at 6 months. So apparently at some point in that 6 month windows, mom would leave the house and would leave her, to herself, right?
Wow.
And she would cry and not have attention or anything like that. And then I remember, we met them very early on, and they would stay over, and she would do this thing, which is it makes perfect sense when you understand trauma. But she would cry in the middle of the night for mommy, right? And then when one of us would get there, she'd be silent. She wouldn't move. She wouldn't even respond to us. And we'd rub her back or whatever. She just like want to know that we're there. And this persisted for years, right? And you see that this thing that happened when, she was a infant, right, with not having that access to mommy, and it plays into, her as a toddler. It just goes to show you how powerful, if you're not paying attention, certain things will travel. So I just wanted to kind of, throw that out there.
You're right. And I think a lot of times we don't realize all of our actions, good or bad, play into our children. And one of the things when I first started coaching, God reminded me of was when my son, not the one that passed, my other son, my oldest one now is 8, Josiah. When he was about 2.5, 3 years old, he walked in the room in the kitchen where I was at with my tennis shoes on, right? And, looking like stinking clown shoes. And but I got down on my knee into his face, and I said, "Hey, buddy, I just want you to know there's going to come a day that I don't fit your shoes."
Ooh.
And so, and then when my 2-year-old did it, I did the same thing. Well, now that my Josiah, 8 years old, is a little bit more intelligent. I mean, he's very intelligent. But he was talking to me again. It happens in the kitchen because I love to cook, so that may be why. But I'm always in the kitchen. But he come, he's like, "Daddy, I want to be like you when I grow up." And man, that touches your heart.
Yeah.
But again, I took that moment as a moment to pour into him and say, "Hey, buddy, man, I love that. That makes me feel great. But I just want you to know, if I raise you to be like me, I failed you because I want you to be better than me. My job as your dad is to raise you to be better than I ever can be."
Yeah.
And I look at him now, and even his personality. We'll just talk about worship, right? I've prayed over both my kids to be worshipers. Well, both my sons. I got a daughter. That's a whole nother long story that just came into my life a couple of years ago. She's 22. But I pour into them, and like we always listen to worship before bed, all that. So this is the thing. They have that heart now. They have that. My youngest son is like, my oldest son, he's, he went and sung they had a talent show. What did he want to sing? He wanted to sing worship. Like, he has a heart. Or he watches how much me and his mother, my wife, pour into people, that my son has his love language is giving. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I've never given him tests, obviously, but like, he'll sit there and have money in his pocket, and he wants to give it to some random cashier at Walmart, or just some random. He'll sit there and like, "Hey, can I give this to this person?" And it's usually money or something, because his money's big to kids. But it just shows his heart. But why is that? Because he's watched what me and his mother's done, So it's the same thing. Like, what we do as parents, they receive it. They're a sponge.
No, for sure. I could see see the same thing, with our kids, right? We use this specific language, which is serving, right? And a servant's heart. So as parents, you're constantly serving. They don't fully understand exactly how much serving that has to happen, but especially when you have 4 kids, you're constantly serving, right? Mm-hmm. So we use that language specifically, and we use that language with them, like who is our best servant, right? And right now it's my daughter, like hands down. She always is asking, Daddy, how can I help you? How can I serve you? And that's the type of stuff that, that is definitely taught. So, when I hear that, it kind of brings joy to my heart. So one of the questions I have for you is, have you felt like your experiences has affected you as a father, and how?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One, about being present. Now, again, I'm not a perfect parent by all means, but I think about being more intentional. With my kids, especially my younger ones, we do everything we can to be intentional, and we're also observant of, like there's certain things that we will or will not say, because my wife comes from kind of a similar abandonment issues or different, her own family trauma as well. So like we've both been through it. So there's certain things that we do that's like, okay, we're not going to, like, I'll give you an example. One thing we do is I'm a strong believer, and this goes back to leadership, of being vulnerable with my kids. Obviously, there's certain things that I can't tell him, but we'll just say my past story. Like, he knows that his dad was in jail at one point, went to jail. Like, I don't hide that from him, because I want him to know the life that I had and who I am now, right? But one thing we don't do is, when it goes back to vulnerability, is we don't allow our kids to say, I'm sorry. We make them say, I apologize, because it goes back to saying, it's me telling you, I'm a sorry person. I'm a sorry this. It rewiring those things to how we talk to them in that manner. To going back to it, always encouraging them, always believing in them, always showing up. So a lot of those things I went through as a kid, like my son knows I'm gonna be there. My oldest son, so Josiah, I have Josiah and Elias. Josiah's 8, Elias is 3, or Josiah's going to be 9 next week. So Josiah's always been a daddy's boy. From birth, he has been a daddy's boy. He wants to be on my side at all times. He loves his dad. No, he loves his mama, but his dad, he's a daddy's boy. Yeah. Elias is more the mama's boy. And so I lean into that, because I realized what it was like not to be that. Like I said, getting down in his face, like teaching those lessons. Or if I hear him say something like, hey, buddy, what are we doing? Why are we saying this about ourselves? Because, sometimes at that age, they start that. Or I use things as a teaching lesson. And he even knows, like, if I call him in here and say he's done something wrong, I'll make sure to pre-emphasis, hey, buddy, this is not going to be me getting on to you. I want this to be a teaching moment. And sometimes he'll ask me, is this a teaching moment? I was like, yes, sir. And then we have those discussions. And I think that's where you raise them, is you talk to them like they're human, and not baby them, none of that. There are discipline moments. Correct. I believe in discipline because, I think part of my problem is I didn't have enough discipline. But I believe in speaking to them like they're grown, not adult wise, but you get what I'm saying. And having those teaching moments, explaining to them, and learning who they are as a person, and getting them involved. And I think that's a big thing. And even within my marriage, like, one thing I do with my sons, my whole family, and it may be because I didn't hear it enough as a kid, I don't know, but I'll just randomly, we're driving down the road, I'm like, hey, Josiah. And they're like, what? I'm like, I love you. And then just says it. And I'll do it with Elias. And if we're all in the car, I'll go through each one of them and do that. Yeah. But I will. All my family, my wife, whatever, I'm like, hey, guess what? What? I love you. And that's it. Nothing behind it. Just keep on with life. Because I want them to know what love is, and that they are loved. Correct. When you come from not feeling much love, you want people to know that they're loved. And another thing is, I've taught them with it, is the value of every person in this world. Everybody has a value. and we must treat them as if they have value. Even if they do us wrong, we still must add value to them, because we're only responsible for our actions, not theirs.
Yeah.
And I can't make them do anything, but I can make myself show the love that God has called me to show them. And so making sure that they know every person in this world has some form of value, no matter what they do. I mean, my grandmother, before she passed, she worked at Walmart for 37 years. And the last few, because of her legs and all that, was at the self checkout. I'm gonna tell you something. What gets me I can get very frustrated hearing somebody talk bad to somebody at Walmart who's just doing their job,
Yeah.
and and realize, and then you see them at church on Sunday. It's like, but just realize it. And then there's been times when I've seen that, and I'll just make sure to stop that person. Hey, thank you for what you're doing, and have a good day.
Yeah.
God bless you. To lift that up, because every person we come in contact with is value. And for me, and I know I kind of go along, but like for me, like I've lost a lot of people in my life. So when I say my grandparents died at a young age, my grandfather and my aunt, that was just a start. So I'm 42 now, and I've already lost, and we're just counting the close-knit people, close friends, close family members, 50 people, over 50 people, right? Since 2023, January 23 to today, and I've actually got a very close friend of mine's funeral next week. And he was actually one of my last staff members when I was with Teen Challenge. He was my right-hand man. He passed away the day before on New Year's Eve. But anyways, so even counting that funeral, we're looking at, since January 23, we're looking at about 14, 15 funerals of close people I've been to. And that's just funerals, not who I've lost. And I said that to say this. When you lose that many people, you recognize, and especially the older I get, I recognize the moments I'm in, right? So I recognize to taking those time to give people the roses while they're still here. Taking the moment to realize that, man, this may be the last time I ever speak to that person. And make sure I leave it on a good note. So teaching my kids the honor of, hey, this person has value. Let's show the love to this person. Let's treat this person like they need to be treated, and things like that. So I guess those are some of a lot of lessons I just poured out all in one. But
yeah, no, those are amazing, and it spawned some thoughts about the things that I do as a dad too, right? Because of the way I grew up. We grew up around a lot of, in the streets, there was a lot of homeless people and stuff like that, but they were mainly harmless. They had their issues, but, so we do a lot of homeless outreach, and I do it, with my kids. And it first kind of started with, there was a lack of appreciation that was happening, with one of our kids. And I didn't like that, because I appreciate everything. I came from Haiti, right? It's a completely different landscape. So just every day, every breath I take, just every situation is an absolute blessing, right? So, when you hear some things of, non-appreciative, behavior or manner, and you're just kind of like, hey, listen, we need to just put this into perspective, right? So, then I came up with, all right, well, this is what I was doing before they were born. I would put together hygiene kits and, go downtown and serve them and give them cookies and all that stuff, and pray for them and write notes. So we prepared all of that stuff and had her in the car. She was like, Daddy, what are we going to do? I was like, we're going to go serve. She was like, what, serving? I was like, you'll find out what serving is. Right? And I remember I pull up next to a bridge, and we talk about choices all the time, right? And there was this guy that stopped. I jumped out the car, gave him some stuff, and then I was like, brother, what happened to you? Like, how did you get out here? Right? And he goes, man, everybody got a story. He said, I'm not gonna lie, I just made too many bad choices. I was like, that's exactly what she needed to hear. Right? And then we drive downtown, and we go and continue. We serve, and and then we go afterwards and have breakfast, and we kind of talk about it. Right? Did you see how appreciative they were when you gave them just a bag of chips, or you see how they're living? You see, how appreciative they were with the hygiene kits and stuff like that. And she was able to kind of see that and understand that we bring joy, and appreciation needs to be at the forefront of where we're at,
Absolutely.
right? Do you know where life began for you, right? And since then, my kids, I've taken all three, the one's a baby, all three to do it. Now they just ask me, Daddy, when are we gonna go
Mm,
serve the people,
mm.
right? So you hear that stuff, and you're just like, wow, that's beautiful, man. That they have this heart now that they want to do, they want to continue on what we're working on at home, which is beautiful to share. So I
Yeah.
just thought I'd
No,
share
I
that.
love that because it actually encourages it. On my son Josiah. He's kind of been in that same way. All kids, the ungratefulness at times, but we're big about goal setting, and so this is the first year I asked him to sit down and set some goals for the year, and one of his was to feed the homeless. That was actually his own goal. I didn't help him nothing, and that was one of his goals. And I said, all right, and we'll see the homeless person. He'll be like, well, we don't give money. I said, no, but we're gonna start. We'll get together. We'll set like you kind of like packets together, have
Yeah,
them in the car. So when we see them, like boom.
yeah.
Um, so I love that. I love that because yeah, that's what we're fixing to do with ours, and that's what you're supposed to do. That's how you
That's what God calls us to.
exactly. And you're developing world changers. It's our job
Yeah,
as parents to shape that next generation. And so many complain about the way the world is, but yet we're not shaping our kids in the way we want the world to be.
correct. I couldn't agree more. So, all right, so let's slide into the business side.
Okay.
We got to going about what life looked like, and then now you get licensed as an agent, and
Mhm.
then what happens from there?
Well, I mean, I was an agent. I mean, I'm still a real estate agent, so
Correct.
still doing it. Been doing it. I guess it's been 4.5 years. Actually, in real estate, we we talk about like, all right, what the agents that came in the big boom of the 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, that was not originally my plan. My original plan was to get it. I started taking the test, and well, actually, the end around August of 2019. It was for me. It was a thing I did for my grandmother because she always wanted me to go back to school, and that's what I felt led to do. Anyways, did that, and I got into real estate right there. Actually, right before I took my test, I was ready to take my test. COVID hit, and they stopped testing. And so I had to
Mm,
wait for like 4 months and study every single day. That goes back to perseverance. Is like, man, I studied every day to pass that test, and it was like 4 months after I completed my course that I was able to go test. And it was like July 2020. So going into real estate, man, I've been able to help so many people. One of the reasons I chose real estate is because coming from the life I come from, I didn't think I would ever own my own home, right?
mm,
The outside of my grandmother, I didn't see any hope. So when my wife and I bought our first house, she had to help me change my mindset of thinking it would happen. Because I was like, I'm not going to ever own a home. I mean, I may own a trailer, but not a home, not a house.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that was my mindset. And so she had to
yeah.
help me change my mindset. And so then I realized how much easier it was than what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that, like, okay, I know I'm not the only one that thinks this. How many people are still paying rent? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, even now, it's like, oh, the interest rate is high. I'm like, well, you're renting from somebody, so you're paying 100%,
Yeah.
interest rate.
Yes, exactly.
You're helping somebody else pay their mortgage. Why not pay your own? You're
Yeah,
paying the same amount
exactly.
monthly. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
but that's just the truth. It's a mindset that we've been trained to think. And
Hmm.
so that was why I got into real estate. Is I knew I didn't want to go back to construction. I knew that was not. I mean, I could do it. I graduated school to be an electrician. I could have easily went in that field, but I wanted to serve people and help people achieve their dreams, and that's why I went real estate. And I've been blessed to do that. I've been blessed to. Actually, my first deal wasn't even a house; it was land. And I knew the dad, and it was the dad and the sons all going in on it. But the thing was, the reason they were getting that land is the wife in her previous marriage, they somehow in the inheritance or whatever, somebody, that dream got taken away from them. All the land they had got taken away from them. So she
Wow.
never thought she would have land again, and here they are buying 200 acres. So My
Oh,
first deal
wow.
was sitting in front of somebody bawling their eyes out at the closing table because she was finally able to give her kids what she thought she never was able to. And that
Oh,
just,
wow.
yeah. So you start seeing things like that, man. It's like, man, that's what real estate's about. You deal with a lot of stuff,
No,
but
you do a lot of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, my clients become family to me. I treat them like they're my family, and I love them like my family. And I check on them all the time. I still text, hey, like today it just got cold down here in Louisiana for about a
Mhm.
week. It'll be cold, but like our cold is like 27. We like it's freezing. But like, hey,
Yeah.
have you winterized your pipes? I know we're a little late, but we need to get on this and
Yeah,
just checking on
exactly.
them. So that's family.
No, I agree. Similar to you, I've been licensed as a. There's nothing I haven't done in the real estate sphere, right? I've been a wholesaler. I've been a house flipper. I've been a home builder, now developer, and now I'm coaching developers. And I've been an agent. I represented, developers on land deals. So I've seen so many. So real estate provides so many different
Mm-hmm.
opportunities of
Absolutely.
growth, and that's why I won't ever do anything but real estate moving forward, right? So and won't ever get sidetracked outside of that again. But okay, so you've enjoyed your time as a realtor, but then you're also doing some coaching. Tell me a little bit about that.
So yeah, I fell in love with coaching. I always knew. Even I remember when I completed Teen Challenge and my first day as an intern, they asked me like, "Hey, what do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years?" And I was like, "Man, I would love to be a counselor because I always
Mm-hmm.
loved helping people."
Mm-hmm.
And then that never happened except in the program. I helped mentor people, and that did not help but feed the passion that I have for people. And even being a youth pastor and ministry, that helping and serving people and pouring into people, the one on ones, I realize that's where I flourish. Is let me sit down. Let's sit down over a cup of coffee and do life together, right? But then I went through a dark season of my life and ended up getting coached myself.
Mm-hmm.
And once I come out of that healing process through that, I realized that was what I'm supposed to be doing. And so about a year and a half ago, really started praying about it. Uh, got blessed with a scholarship to go through to get certified as an ICF, which I'm still working on all that. But as I was praying about what kind of coach I want to be, first I thought it was going to be men, coming out and kind of battling things I've battled, fighting that. And then I really felt in my spirit God telling me, why do you think I put the passion of leadership within you? I don't want you to affect ones. If you can affect the leader, you can affect the multitude. And leadership has been something for as long as I remember. I've been in different forms of leadership, but also I've had a passion for leadership. I love studying it. That's the books I always go drift to is always the leadership books and realizing that I've had a passion for it. So going to that and going back to what I said earlier with the when I stepped into real estate, like putting those kingdom principles into play. Um, I think a lot of times whether again leader now leaders I do believe leader is a spiritual gift, but at the same time I believe everybody is a leader in their own right. So as a
Yep.
parent, you're a leader. You're leading your kids. So when I say leader in that respect, is even in our homes, like how are we putting these kingdom principles into play? How are we, doing certain things, right? But then when I first started it, my whole vision of leadership is this empowering leaders to empower leaders. Okay, so as leaders, whether you're in a business or whatever, you need to be always empowering somebody next to you. So when I was director, I always had a staff member that if I would have died in a car wreck, the ministry would not have ever skipped a beat because he already knew everything I was doing and probably could have done it better because I poured into him those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we see in leadership that piece is not put into play. We don't start empowering until we're time to retire,
Yep.
which I think is false because again, that is our job is to as leaders is to grow those around us. And then when I did it, that was the main thing, and it was still stand on three core values. I don't even they're partially principles, but we'll say it like this: is vulnerability, authenticity, and adding value. First you add value to yourself before you can add value to others. You learn
Correct.
to be vulnerable. I think vulnerability is a leadership quality that does not get spoken of enough. And then being authentic. You can't be authentic until you first do the other two, And so just being the leader that God called you to be, we sometimes, especially in social media age, and we're trying to cookie cutter what everybody else is doing because it looks like it works. And some of those things may work, but God didn't, just like what you're doing, he didn't call me to be a you because he don't need another you. He has you to do what you do. He needs a me, and that's the same thing with the leadership is who God's called us to be as a leader is he's called me to be the leader I'm called to be, not the way you are. And there we may share some similarities, but at the end of the day, you're not leading the people I'm leading because that's not who God needs you to lead, and that's the way. Absolutely. And so learn to be that leader that you're called to be and being authentic in that and being willing to go against the grain if that's what God called you to do.
Amazing. Yeah, as I enter my coaching journey from construction and real estate, which is it's all in the same. It's all a bunch of lessons learned, right? I've had to learn to be more vulnerable. So in the last 3 years, I've had to really change a lot, and it started in. It's funny. It was 2021 is I entered therapy for the first time. I didn't even know if I needed therapy, but absolutely I did. But I remember I told her all of these things that happened in my life experience, and she just kept saying, she's like, Sam, your story is beautiful. Sam, your story is beautiful. It's because without those things and those challenges, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing in foster care, right? So, and then I realized too, and I think that a lot of people battle this when you go through a lot of challenges. And she was like, Sam, I could hear it. She was like, you're ashamed of how, your story, you're ashamed of it. And that's what's holding you back. And that's what's stopping people from connecting with you. Right. Which was an aha for me. And when I heard that, and I was like, oh, that's the hurdle between me and people. So then I just started sharing. I started sharing more and more of my story. And the craziest thing happened. People started becoming more and more drawn to it. So now I just share openly because I'm doing something different. I'm doing something for the kingdom with the kids. And, I coach through, kingdom principles, in my coaching program when we talk about real estate investors and stuff like that. So it's been an absolute, beautiful thing to be, vulnerable. It allows you to be seen. Right?
Yeah, that's so. And again, like you're saying, people draft you. If you're a leader, people are more willing to be vulnerable with you if you're first vulnerable with them, right? And correct, so they're more open. Hey, going back to what my kids, with the shoe thing, that was part of it. Is like, hey, apologizing to your kids. So many parents just think they don't have to, especially the day when we grew up.
We grew up, yeah.
But now it's like, hey, I apologize to my kids. If I messed up, he needs to know I messed up, and I'm very quick to apologize because how is he going to learn how to apologize if I don't first show him? Correct. And being vulnerable in those moments. And that's, you're right. Sometimes we have to go through these things, especially like all the stuff that we both went through growing up. Like, I believe there's always purpose in the pain, right? So like, what can I learn in this pain? So even throughout my life, like, what have I learned? What are some of the things that's kind of drawn me to make me into who I am, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? And when I was going through, I started, you're talking about therapy. I went for, about 6 months or so in 23. And that's when I finally dealt with the grief of my son, my grandmother, the family trauma and the family wounds with my mom, which I didn't realize how much it was until she made me list them. And I'm like, oh, this lady turned these pages. I got some stuff going on. Yeah, exactly. I got issues, man. Exactly. And then when your therapist says, well, we're going to just stop right there. I'm like, oh, I'm screwed up,
Exactly.
But I look at that, and I look at that, and man, my wife and I went through we were together, but like when I say we went through some stuff, like, man, the best way I described it is like you're in the middle of a city and it's Armageddon, only y'all two are standing, right? Us and our family were it was bad. And a lot of it did have to do with me because of my depression and, undiagnosed ADHD, the whole nine. I'm not going on that route, but like, all that stuff, but even through it, I remember crying out to God one day, right? And I'm mad. It was one of those angry cries out to God, like, why, God, type of moments. And I mean, I'm screaming, and like I was coming from the grocery store, and I'm really praying. I'm crying. I'm hollering, like frustrated. at everything we're going through because I'm tired and I'm beat up and I'm tired of being beat up. And I remember pulling in my driveway, and it's almost like I stopped to breathe. And he's like, "You done now? Okay, now it's my turn." And I really felt in my spirit God tell me, "Justin, if you're called to the hurt, you got to know what hurt feels like.
Correct.
If you're called to help the broken, you got to know what broken feels like."
Correct.
And in that moment, that's not what you want to hear from God. That is not at all. I want a
No.
daddy hug, and instead I'm getting daddy truth. And I was like, all right. And that's when I began to process a lot of things and look through things. I switched my lens. I'm like, okay, there's purpose in this pain, and it's not joyful. But looking back, hindsight 2020, and looking to where I am today, I thank God for everything I went through, as much as it stunk. And
I agree.
because it made me into who I am, and I'm able to fully walk into who I am because he had to shave off a lot of the stuff of who I wasn't. So, yeah man, therapy, it'll wake you up on some things, make you realize that you're crazy, but you're not the only crazy one in the world.
No, exactly. Right. Or why am I looking at this way? Right.
Yeah.
There's a specific reason why, and it's in there from a past experience, but that's good. So before we go, we'd like to ask, everybody, what is your biggest and best lessons learned from business and in life?
I mean, I guess I've already really gave my life ones. It's we all go through challenges. We all have stories. I have a big saying when it comes to stories and how important you were talking about how important your story is. And even what that homeless guy said to you is like, everybody has a story, just some have not been heard yet. Right. So I'm big on that.
Correct.
So I'm big on telling the story and trying to listen to other people's stories. And then also going back, I guess that's kind of where my core principles came from my coaching, was the adding value, really adding value to myself so I can add value to others, always learning, always digging in, being vulnerable, being willing to be open. Because once I broke that barrier of being Mr. Tough Guy from the streets, that I don't talk about my feelings, once I broke that barrier, things begin to shift in my life. And being authentic and learning my authentic self, right? So that in business, it goes back to perseverance, man. I mean, when you're starting a business, especially so I'm in the journey of starting this coaching thing. It's only been really launched a year, and I have only had a couple of clients, and it's kind of been a slow start because I've been learning balance. And also, when I went into real estate, I was on a team my first few years, and October made a year was my first full year. I guess last year, 2024, was my last full year not on a team and being a single agent. So it's a lot of learning in that area. So two different things. I'm almost like starting two businesses on my own, right?
Yeah.
And I learned how to persevere. I learned how to, I guess, face the challenges that are given to me. And something struck me the other day. I was listening to something that hit me is two aspects of it. One is only focus on what I can control, right?
Correct.
I can't control my clients coming to me. I can't control their outcome of that, but I can control the work that I put in. I can't control the discipline I have when it comes to the things I need to do, right? So that side of business, and then also it goes back to life and business. I heard this on a podcast, can't remember who it was, but it hit me hard, and I've really been dwelling on it, so I'm going to say it is focus more on the obituary values versus the resume values. And if you focus on those obituary values, the resume values will stack because they grow into that. That's where your character, all those things are developed. So, it's perseverance. Don't give up. Focus on only what you can control.
I couldn't agree more. And I hit this rhythm where I realized first off, I hadn't told my story, but my story was my superpower. And you overcome so much, right? And you're giving in this capacity. You want to give all of these lessons that you learn and all these traits, but you got to hear the story first, and also you got to be vulnerable first to be able to allow that space for someone to open up, which has been a big lesson learned for me. So I would like to share that. So share more of your story, so it humanizes you, allow people to kind of see you for who you are, and see you for the growth that has happened in your life. So
Yeah,
Just wanted to,
I always say this. One is I kind of say the same, but I say vulnerability is a superpower. But same concept though. But when it comes to our story, there's somebody that needs to hear the story, right? There's somebody out there that needs to hear my story, your story, whoever's story, because this is the thing. Even the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. So
correct.
like somebody needs to hear your story. Somebody needs to hear the things you went through in life because going back to what I said earlier, there's going to be people that you can reach that I would never be able to reach, not only because of contact, but also personality,
Yep.
story, what we've been through. Like
Yep.
all those things matter. So yeah, I'm with you. Like your story matters and people need to hear it. And you need to tell it because again, some people don't even get to tell your story. And unfortunately that in my opinion, that's partially why suicides are so high is because
I agree.
they don't have a place to tell their story and they don't feel valued.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so like I'm big on something. One of my New Year's goal is, I say goals every year, is once a month going to a coffee shop and just trying to sit down with a random person and ask them their story. Nothing else.
Mhm.
No business aside. Not trying to get your business. I want to hear your story
Mhm.
because I want them to know they matter, no matter who it is.
Yeah, yeah, and yes, I absolutely agree with you, and that's one of the things that I do with the homeless. You really hear how disruptive that beginning, part was in their life, and
Mm-hmm.
then next thing you know, they end up homeless. They don't have a support system. That tends to be the trend, and most people can't. Um, Most people don't hear those stories, right? They just see or assume, oh, they're on drugs and that's why they're there. Like, no, what happened is, you know, father died before, mom was on drugs, or mom was a stripper, and they had, no, family support, and then now they are in trouble and now they don't have a choice and now they're homeless.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how some of these, stories go, but people don't hear that or know that to understand that perspective. So for me, I'm just sharing, all of the lessons that I've learned, through the years, and trying to, grow more awareness in the foster space because it's absolutely necessary. And there's more kids that need homes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is like there's more kids in these homes. And I applaud you on fostering. My wife and I have always talked about adopting. That is a big thing. Is like there's so many kids out there that need to feel loved. My wife and
Correct.
I were youth pastors. We have a spiritual daughter. Like we didn't foster her, but she's part of our family. We have family dinners over, because
Mm-hmm.
there were some areas that she needed that, and
Correct.
we needed that as parents. So
Yeah.
I applaud you on that, man. It's definitely needed.
Yeah. Appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for spending some time with us. And everyone has a story, and everybody's story is important. So
Yeah,
have a great day.
yes. Thank you for having me.